The robot that fooled Napoleon, the mechanical Turk. Vienna, July 1809. The grand halls of Schönbrunn Palace echoed with whispered anticipation. Outside, the wounds of war still festered. Napoleon Bonaparte, Emperor of France and conqueror of much of Europe, had just emerged victorious from the Battle of Wagram. But on this particular evening he faced a different kind of adversary. One that did not bleed, did not fear, and appeared to possess an intelligence that defied all understanding. Across from him sat a figure draped in ornate Ottoman robes, wearing a turban that spoke of distant Eastern mysteries. Its face, carved from wood, bore a black beard and penetrating gray eyes. In one hand, it held a long Turkish pipe. The other rested upon a cabinet adorned with a chessboard. This was no ordinary opponent. This was the mechanical Turk, a machine that had captivated the imagination of Europe for nearly 4 decades. A machine that seemed to think. The story of the mechanical Turk is not merely a tale of technological ingenuity or masterful deception. It is a profound meditation on what it means to be intelligent, on the boundaries between human and machine, and on our eternal fascination with creating life from lifeless matter. It is a story that begins in the courts of Austrian royalty, traverses the coffee houses of Paris and the theaters of America, and ultimately ends in flames. But its legacy burns brighter than ever in our modern age of artificial intelligence. The genius behind the illusion. To understand the mechanical Turk, we must first understand its creator. Johann Wolfgang von Kempelen was born on January 23, 1734, in Pressburg, a bustling city that today we know as Bratislava, Slovakia. But in Kempelen's time, it stood as part of the vast Habsburg Empire, a realm where innovation and tradition danced an intricate waltz. Kempelen was no ordinary man. Born into a noble family with Irish ancestry that had settled in the region around 1640, he received an education that would be the envy of most scholars. While some sources mention he studied philosophy and law at the University of Vienna, enrollment records don't confirm this, suggesting he may have attended the Academy in Dür instead, where students were prepared specifically for careers in government service. What we know with certainty is that he mastered multiple languages beyond his native German, including Latin, Hungarian, French, Italian, and Slovak, with later addition of English for his travels. Based on his later accomplishments and positions, we can reasonably conclude his education was comprehensive and rigorous, encompassing law, philosophy, physics, engineering, and architecture. He was, in every sense, a true polymath, a Renaissance man born in the Age of Enlightenment. By the time he entered adulthood, Kempelen had already established himself as an indispensable member of the imperial bureaucracy. In 1755, fresh from his studies, he joined a legal team tasked with translating the Codex Thersianus, Empress Maria Theresa's comprehensive civil law code, from Latin into German. This was no small undertaking. It required precision, linguistic mastery, and an understanding of legal nuances that would have challenged even the most seasoned scholars. Success followed success. By 1761, at merely 27 years old, Kempelen became secretary to Miklós Esterházy, the powerful First Minister of Hungary. 5 years later, he was appointed director of the Hungarian salt mines, a position of enormous economic importance. Salt was the gold of food preservation, crucial for feeding armies and cities alike. Under Kempelen's systematic management, production surged by 30% within 18 months. But Kempelen's interests extended far beyond administration and resource management. He was an inventor at heart, constantly dreaming of mechanical wonders. He designed steam engines, water pumps, and a floating bridge in Pressburg. In 1778, he met Maria Theresa von Parody, a 19-year-old blind pianist and composer who was the Empress's godchild. For her, he created a specialized device with movable type that allowed her to write, becoming one of the earliest assistive technologies for the visually impaired. And in 1791 he would construct the first functional speech synthesizer, a device that could mimic human speech through bellows and mechanical apparatus. This achievement alone would have secured his place in history. Yet it was a chance encounter in 1769 that would birth his most famous and most controversial creation. The challenge at court. In the autumn of 1769, Kempelen attended a performance at Schönbrunn Palace, the magnificent summer residence of Empress Maria Theresa. The entertainment that evening was provided by François Pelletier, a French illusionist whose magnetic experiments and optical tricks had captivated audiences across Europe. The Empress sat entranced, marveling at each new wonder. But Kempelen, with his scientific training and analytical mind, was less impressed. He could see through the theatrical flourishes to the basic principles underneath. During the performance, or perhaps afterwards in conversation, Kempelen made a bold claim. He could create something far more impressive than anything Pelletier had shown. The Empress, intrigued and perhaps skeptical, challenged him to prove it. Kempelen accepted. He promised to return within 6 months with an invention that would surpass all expectations. What followed was a period of intense, secretive work. Kempelen retreated to his workshop, and when he emerged he brought with him something that would change the course of entertainment, philosophy, and the early history of artificial intelligence. Birth of an automaton. When Kempelen unveiled his creation before the Habsburg court in 1770, the assembled nobles and courtiers gasped in collective astonishment. Before them stood a cabinet measuring approximately 3.5 feet long, 2 feet deep, and 2.5 feet high. It was constructed of polished maple wood, ornately decorated in the style befitting a royal presentation. Atop this cabinet sat a life-sized figure of a man, carved with meticulous attention to detail. He was dressed in flowing Ottoman robes of rich fabric, topped with a turban that evoked the mystique of the East. His face bore a black beard, and his gray eyes seemed to follow observers as they moved about the room. In his left hand, he held a long Turkish smoking pipe, the kind that European travelers associated with Oriental sorcerers and wise men from distant lands. His right arm extended across the top of the cabinet, resting near a chessboard that was permanently fixed to its surface. The presentation began with Kempelen demonstrating the cabinet's interior. He opened various doors and compartments, revealing an intricate maze of gears, wheels, springs, and levers. Clockwork mechanisms gleamed in the candlelight, suggesting the complex machinery required to animate such a device. A drawer at the front pulled open to reveal the chess pieces, carved from red and white ivory. When both the front and back doors were opened simultaneously, observers could see completely through certain sections of the cabinet, seemingly proving that no human could be concealed within. Then came the moment that would define the Turk's legend. Kempelen wound the mechanism with a large key, and the machinery hummed to life with a satisfying mechanical sound. He invited Count Ludwig von Kobenzl, an Austrian courtier, to sit opposite the Turk and play a game of chess. What happened next seemed impossible. The Turk raised its left hand with a smooth, if somewhat stiff motion. It grasped a chess piece with mechanical precision and moved it to a new square. The game had begun. And the Turk, this wooden automaton with its maze of gears and springs, played not just competently but brilliantly. Kobenzl, no novice at chess, found himself outmaneuvered at every turn. The Turk responded to each of his moves with careful consideration, sometimes pausing as if deep in thought before executing its counter-move. Within 30 minutes, Kobenzl was defeated. Checkmate. Other courtiers eagerly stepped forward to challenge the machine, and one by one, they fell before its mechanical genius. Even when accomplished chess players were summoned, the Turk prevailed more often than not. When one brave challenger attempted an illegal move, the Turk did not merely ignore it. The automaton picked up the incorrectly moved piece and deliberately replaced it in its original position, as if to say, "I am watching, I understand, and I will not be cheated." The court erupted in animated discussion. How was this possible? Could a machine truly think? Had Kempelen created artificial life? The questions multiplied faster than answers could be found, and the legend of the mechanical Turk was born. The European Grand Tour. The success at the Habsburg court was merely the beginning. Following Empress Maria Theresa's death in 1780, her son Emperor Joseph II requested another demonstration. Satisfied with what he witnessed, Joseph encouraged Kempelen to tour the Turk throughout Europe. And so, in 1783, the machine embarked on a journey that would make it the most famous automaton in history. Paris was the first major stop, and the French capital proved to be the perfect stage for such a marvel. This was the age of enlightenment, when coffee houses buzzed with philosophical debate and scientific discovery. The city that would soon give birth to revolution was already intoxicated with ideas about reason, progress, and the perfectibility of humanity. Into this heady atmosphere came the Turk, a mechanical being that seemed to embody the ultimate triumph of rational thought. The Turk took up residence at the Café de la Régence, the most famous chess establishment in Europe. Here, the greatest players of the age gathered to match wits over the 64 squares. It was here that the Turk faced François-André Danikin Philidor, widely acknowledged as the strongest chess player in the world. The match drew enormous crowds, with spectators packing the café to capacity. To everyone's surprise, including perhaps Kempelen's, Philidor managed to defeat the Turk. But the victory was hard-won, and Philidor himself reportedly declared it the most fatiguing game of chess he had ever played. The fact that the machine could give the world's best player such trouble only enhanced its reputation. It was not invincible, but it was formidable, and that made it seem more genuine, more real. Among the Turk's Parisian audiences was Benjamin Franklin, then serving as American ambassador to France. Franklin, himself an inventor and ardent chess enthusiast, observed the machine with the keen eye of a scientist. He played a game against the automaton, and while accounts differ on the outcome, Franklin was sufficiently impressed to keep a copy of Philip Thickness' skeptical book about the Turk in his personal library. For a mind as inquisitive as Franklin's, the Turk represented a fascinating puzzle, regardless of whether it was genuine or an elaborate hoax. From Paris, Kempelen took the Turk to London, where it was exhibited daily for the price of 5 shillings. Here, skepticism ran deeper than in France. The English, with their empirical tradition and distrust of continental showmanship, scrutinized the Turk with suspicious eyes. Philip Thickness, a travel writer and noted skeptic, attended multiple exhibitions specifically to expose what he was certain must be a fraud. Thickness published his conclusions, asserting that while Kempelen was a very ingenious man, the Turk was a complicated piece of clockwork which is nothing more than one of many other ingenious devices to misguide and delude the observers. He speculated that a small child was hidden within the cabinet, though he could not explain precisely how such concealment was achieved given the demonstrations of the cabinet's interior. Others proposed different theories. Some suggested the use of powerful magnets manipulated from beneath the floor. Others thought that mirrors created optical illusions. A few even proposed that Kempelen had discovered a way to harness supernatural forces. But despite the multitude of theories, no one could definitively prove how the Turk functioned. The mystery deepened with each performance, and public fascination grew accordingly. The Emperor and the Automaton. By 1809, Wolfgang von Kempelen had been dead for 5 years, succumbing to an abdominal blockage in Vienna on March 26, 1804. But the Turk lived on. Johann Nepomuk Malzel, a German inventor and showman famous for his panharmonicon and his work on the metronome, had purchased the machine from Kempelen's heirs. Malzel understood both the mechanical intricacies of the device and its theatrical potential. He spent years refining it, making the movements smoother, adding a voice box that could announce "ek" when delivering check. It was Malzel who brought the Turk to Schönbrunn Palace in July of 1809, during Napoleon's occupation of Vienna following the Battle of Wagram. The meeting between the mechanical Turk and Napoleon Bonaparte remains one of the most famous chess games in history, even though only one of the participants was human. Napoleon at this time was at the zenith of his power. He had redrawn the map of Europe, crowned himself emperor, and seemed unstoppable in his military genius. Yet Napoleon's relationship with chess was complicated. While he enjoyed the game and played frequently, he was by all contemporary accounts merely adequate. His strategic brilliance on the battlefield did not translate to the chessboard. He was impatient, prone to rushing moves, and sometimes lacked the deep calculation that characterized true chess masters. According to various historical accounts, Napoleon played 2 games against the Turk. The first game quickly descended into controversy. Napoleon, whether out of genuine tactical confusion, impatience, or a desire to test the machine, made 3 illegal moves in succession. The first time, the Turk calmly picked up the incorrectly moved piece and returned it to its proper square. The second illegal move produced the same response. But when Napoleon attempted a third illegal move, the Turk's mechanical arm swept across the board, knocking all the pieces onto the floor in what appeared to be an expression of mechanical indignation. The room fell silent. No one had ever seen the Turk react so dramatically. Napoleon, perhaps embarrassed or perhaps amused, agreed to a second game, this time playing according to proper rules. The game that followed has been preserved for history, documented by various observers and later chess historians. Napoleon opened with what would later be known, somewhat unfairly, as the Napoleon opening. 1 e4 e5 2 queen f3. It was an unusual and ultimately weak opening, developing the queen far too early and blocking the development of the knight and bishop. Any strong player would immediately recognize this as a mistake, and the operator inside the Turk, Johann Allgaier, was indeed a strong player. Allgaier, whose identity we'll explore shortly, methodically dismantled Napoleon's position. The game lasted 24 moves before the Turk delivered checkmate. Napoleon had been defeated, not by an enemy army, but by a wooden automaton dressed in Turkish robes. The irony was not lost on observers. The great conqueror, who had humbled the military establishments of Austria, Prussia, and Russia, could not defeat a machine. But of course it was not truly a machine that defeated him. Hidden within that ornate cabinet, cramped and sweating in the July heat, sat Johann Baptist Allgaier, one of the finest chess players in Vienna. Born on June 19, 1763, in Schussenried in the Duchy of Württemberg, Allgaier had risen to prominence in the Viennese chess scene through sheer skill and determination. His father worked as a Hofmeister at a monastery, responsible for educating children of wealthy and noble families. Young Johann was initially directed toward theology, but during a trip to Poland, he discovered chess and found his true calling. The details of this transformation remain somewhat mysterious, but based on what we know of his later dedication to the game, this could imply a profound awakening to his natural talent. By the late 1780s, Allgaier had established himself as Vienna's strongest player, winning an important match that earned him 1,500 florins, an enormous sum roughly equivalent to $52,500 in modern currency when we consider the purchasing power of the era. He had authored a chess manual and given lessons to the sons and brothers of Emperor Francis II, moving in the highest circles of Viennese society. Allgaier's life was not easy. During the Napoleonic Wars he served in the Austrian army, and in 1809, while working in a field hospital during the height of the conflict, he contracted chronic asthma, a condition that would plague him for the rest of his life. This illness must have made the confined, poorly ventilated space inside the Turk's cabinet particularly difficult to endure. The physical toll of operating the machine while suffering from a respiratory condition suggests a level of dedication, or perhaps financial necessity, that drove him despite considerable personal discomfort. Yet he operated the Turk during some of its most famous exhibitions, including the match against Napoleon. He manipulated the controls by candlelight, watching the opponent's moves through a system of magnetic indicators, and using a pantograph mechanism to move the Turk's arm above. The Hidden Masters. Johann Allgaier was merely one of several chess masters who operated the Turk throughout its 84-year existence. During Kempelen's lifetime, the identities of the operators remain a mystery, lost to history and Kempelen's careful secrecy. But after Maelzel acquired the machine, various chess professionals were recruited to become the mind within the mechanical body. Hyacinthe Henri Boncourt operated the Turk during parts of its European tour. In 1818, Boncourt caught influenza while inside the machine during a performance. Unable to suppress his coughing, the sound echoed from within the supposedly mechanical cabinet, creating considerable embarrassment and strengthening suspicions about the Turk's true nature. Aaron Alexander, another French chess master, spent time as the Turk's operator, as did William Louis, Jacques Mouret, and several others whose names have come down to us through fragmentary records and later revelations. But perhaps the most dedicated operator was William Schlumberger, an Alsatian chess expert whom Maelzel recruited for the American tour that began in 1826. Schlumberger was described as a small, slight man, which was fortunate given the cramped conditions inside the cabinet. He traveled with Maelzel throughout the United States, operating the Turk in Boston, New York, Philadelphia, and Baltimore. The physical demands were extraordinary. The operator had to sit in a cramped space, often in stifling heat, for extended periods. They had to maintain absolute silence, even when coughing or in discomfort. They had to follow the game through a system of magnetic indicators, calculating moves by candlelight through narrow viewing slits. And they had to manipulate the controls with sufficient precision to make the Turk's movements appear smooth and mechanical. But there were occasional moments of humanity breaking through the mechanical facade. In Baltimore in 1827, during an unusually hot day, the oppressive temperature inside the cabinet became unbearable for Schlumberger. The combination of heat, poor ventilation, and the physical exertion of operating the machine likely created conditions approaching heat exhaustion. He signaled desperately to Maelzel that he needed to escape. Before Maelzel could end the demonstration gracefully, Schlumberger, in what appears to have been a state of near panic, fled from the cabinet in front of the audience. Two teenage boys watching from a nearby rooftop witnessed everything and understood immediately what they were seeing. The secret, so carefully guarded for more than half a century, had been partially exposed. Yet remarkably, the Turk's exhibitions continued. The public's desire to believe in the mechanical marvel proved stronger than scattered reports of its fraudulent nature. The shows went on, the crowd still came, and the legend persisted. The Age of American Wonder. When Maelzel brought the Turk to America in 1826, he was bringing more than an entertainment curiosity. He was bringing a philosophical question wrapped in Turkish robes. America, young and energetic, still defining its identity as a nation, proved to be particularly receptive to such marvels. The debut in New York drew over 100 spectators, and newspaper reviews were rapturous. The Turk played matches throughout the major eastern cities, generally winning but occasionally losing to particularly skilled opponents. In Philadelphia, a local woman named Mrs. Fisher managed to defeat the automaton, a victory that was celebrated in local papers. In Baltimore, Charles Carroll, an elderly signer of the Declaration of Independence, also notched a win against the famous machine. But it was in Richmond, Virginia, where the Turk would encounter one of its most significant challengers, not across the chessboard, but through the power of deductive reasoning. In 1835, a young writer named Edgar Allan Poe attended an exhibition of Maelzel's various automatons, which included not just the Turk but also a mechanical rope dancer and a trumpeter. Poe was 26 years old, not yet famous for the macabre tales and poems that would define his legacy. But he was already possessed of a razor-sharp analytical mind and a fascination with hoaxes and puzzles. He watched the Turk play, and unlike most spectators who were simply dazzled, Poe was thinking, analyzing, deconstructing. The following year, in 1836, Poe published an essay titled Maelzel's Chess Player in the Southern Literary Messenger. The essay is remarkable not just for its content but for its methodology. Poe didn't claim to have definitive proof of how the Turk worked. Instead, he presented a series of logical observations and deductions, a method of reasoning that would later become the foundation of his detective stories featuring C. Auguste Dupin. Poe's central argument was elegant in its simplicity. If the Turk were truly a machine, it would play perfectly and never lose. A true calculating machine, like Charles Babbage's proposed analytical engine, would make no errors. But the Turk did make errors. It occasionally lost games. Therefore, it must be guided by human intelligence, which is fallible. He went further, observing that the Turk's moves did not occur at regular intervals as one would expect from clockwork, but varied in timing, accelerating or slowing in patterns consistent with human thought. He noted that Maelzel always seemed to position himself near the cabinet at crucial moments. He observed that a certain small man, William Schlumberger, traveled everywhere with Maelzel but was never seen during the Turk's performances. Poe couldn't prove exactly how Schlumberger fit inside the cabinet, but his suspicions were essentially correct. The essay is a masterpiece of deductive reasoning, and it influenced Poe's later fiction profoundly. The ratiocination method that Dupin employs in The Murders in the Rue Morgue and Other Tales has its roots in Poe's analysis of the mechanical Turk. In a sense, the Turk helped birth the modern detective story. Twilight in Flames. By the late 1830s, the Turk star was fading. Poe's essay, while not definitively proving the hoax, had planted seeds of skepticism that grew over time. Maelzel, now aging and increasingly dependent on alcohol, found fewer venues willing to host the exhibitions. In 1838, while returning to Europe from Havana, Maelzel died aboard ship in the harbor of La Guaira, Venezuela. Yellow fever was listed as the official cause, though given contemporary accounts of his drinking, alcohol may have been a contributing factor. William Schlumberger had died earlier that same year, also from yellow fever, while the pair were touring Cuba. The tropics had claimed both the showman and his secret chess master. The Turk passed through several hands. It was purchased by John Ohl, a friend of Maelzel's, but he struggled to sell it. Eventually, it came into the possession of John Kearsley Mitchell, a physician and professor who happened to be Edgar Allan Poe's personal doctor. Mitchell, fascinated by the mechanical marvel, spent the summer of 1840 painstakingly reconstructing the Turk, which had fallen into disrepair. Mitchell and his colleagues formed a sort of enthusiast club for the Turk, eventually donating it to the Chinese Museum in Philadelphia. The museum, despite its name, was actually part of Charles Wilson Peale's larger collection of curiosities, housed on George Street. There, the once famous automaton sat largely forgotten in a back corner, occasionally dusted off for exhibition but no longer commanding the attention it once had. On July 5, 1854, fire broke out at the National Theatre, which stood adjacent to the museum. It was summer, swelteringly hot, and the flames spread quickly through the dry wooden structures. By the time anyone realized the museum was in danger, it was too late. The fire consumed the building and with it the mechanical Turk. Mitchell's son, Silas Weir Mitchell, a physician and writer who would later become famous for his work in neurology, reportedly rushed to the scene but arrived too late to save the automaton. In what may have been a poignant literary flourish rather than literal truth, he later claimed to have heard through the roaring flames the final utterance of our departed friend, described as sternly whispered, oft-repeated syllables, ek, French for check, check. Whether Mitchell actually heard this or imagined it in retrospect as a fitting epitaph, the image captures the tragic end of a mechanical legend that had captivated the world for more than 8 decades. The secret revealed. With the Turk destroyed, the time had come for the full truth to be told. In 1857, 3 years after the fire, Silas Mitchell published a series of articles in the Chess Monthly magazine, finally explaining in complete detail how the mechanical Turk had functioned for 84 years. The secret, as many had suspected, was a human operator concealed within the cabinet. But the genius lay in the method of concealment. The cabinet's interior was not a single open space but a series of cleverly designed compartments. The operator sat on a sliding seat that could move between different sections as the doors were opened for inspection. When Kempelen or Maelzel opened the front doors to display the clockwork machinery, the operator would slide to the rear of the cabinet, hidden behind the visible gears. When the back doors were opened, the operator would shift forward. The drawer at the bottom only extended a third of the way into the cabinet, creating additional space for concealment. The chessboard on top of the cabinet was magnetic, and beneath it, in the hidden interior, was a smaller duplicate board with magnetic indicators. When the opponent moved a piece, the magnetic connection caused corresponding indicators to rise or fall on the concealed board, showing the operator exactly where each piece stood. The operator watched this hidden board by the light of a single candle, which was ventilated through a tube leading up through the Turk's turban, disguised among other candelabras. To move the Turk's arm, the operator used a pantograph, a mechanical device that translated small movements of a pointer on the internal board into larger movements of the Turk's arm above. Depressing a foot pedal would lower the arm, while moving a lever would open and close the hand to grasp pieces. Other mechanisms produced the clockwork sounds that added authenticity to the illusion. It was an engineering marvel, even if it was a deception. The precision required to coordinate all these movements, the ingenuity of the sliding compartments, the use of magnets and indicators, all testified to Kempelen's extraordinary mechanical skill. He had created not a thinking machine, but something perhaps more impressive. A perfect illusion that challenged the boundaries between human and machine, real and artificial. Legacy of an illusion. The mechanical Turk vanished in flames, but its influence endured, growing stronger with each passing decade. The machine that was a hoax became the inspiration for genuine artificial intelligence. Consider Charles Babbage, the British mathematician and inventor often called the father of the computer. Babbage witnessed the Turk's performance in 1819, and while he immediately recognized it as a fraud, the encounter set him thinking in profound ways. If a fake machine could appear to think, could a real machine be built that actually could? This question would obsess Babbage for the rest of his life. His designs for the analytical engine, conceived as the first programmable computer, were in some measure inspired by his reflections on the Turk. The machine that deceived became a catalyst for machines that truly compute. Edmund Cartwright attended a Turk exhibition in London in 1784 and, according to accounts from the period, made a revealing observation afterward. He reportedly remarked that constructing a machine to weave would be more challenging than building one to play chess. Inspired by this line of thinking, he went on to invent the power loom, a crucial innovation of the Industrial Revolution. Whether the connection was as direct as later accounts suggest, or whether Cartwright was already contemplating mechanical weaving and simply used the Turk as a rhetorical comparison, we cannot know with certainty. But the timing and his recorded comments suggest that a fraudulent chess player may have contributed, however indirectly, to genuine technological revolution. The Turk's legacy extends into literature and culture. Ambrose Bierce wrote Moxon's Master in 1909, a dark tale about a chess-playing automaton that closely resembles the Turk. Walter Benjamin, in his Theses on the Philosophy of History written in 1940, used the Turk as a philosophical metaphor, suggesting that historical materialism, like the Turk, is guided by hidden forces that remain concealed from view. In 2005, the online retail giant Amazon launched a service called Amazon Mechanical Turk, explicitly named after Kempelen's creation. The service allows businesses to access human intelligence for tasks that computers struggle with, such as identifying objects in images or evaluating the quality of search results. Just as the original Turk concealed a human chess master behind an apparently mechanical facade, Amazon's Mechanical Turk conceals human workers behind a digital interface. The name acknowledges a truth about artificial intelligence. Often what appears to be pure machine intelligence is actually human intelligence, mediated and hidden by technology. And then there is chess itself. In 1997, IBM's Deep Blue computer defeated world champion Garry Kasparov in a highly publicized match. It was hailed as a watershed moment in artificial intelligence, the point where machines finally surpassed humans in a domain long considered the province of pure intellect. The parallels with the Turk are obvious and were not lost on observers. But this time the machine really could think, or at least calculate with such speed and depth that the difference became philosophical rather than practical. Today, chess engines running on ordinary smartphones can easily defeat the world's strongest human players. The dream that the Turk only simulated has become reality. Yet the questions the Turk raised remain as relevant as ever. What does it mean to think? What is the nature of intelligence? And what happens to human identity when machines can perform tasks we once thought defined our uniqueness? Conclusion. The Mechanical Turk was a magnificent deception, but it was never just a hoax. It was a mirror held up to the Age of Enlightenment's aspirations and anxieties. In an era intoxicated with reason and progress, when it seemed that science might unlock every mystery, the Turk asked a profound question. Could human ingenuity create artificial life? Could mind be reduced to mechanism? The answer, as it turned out, was both no and yes. No, Kempelen could not create a thinking machine with 18th-century clockwork and wooden gears. But yes, his audacious vision, his suggestion that such a thing might be possible, inspired generations of inventors and thinkers who eventually did create machines capable of genuine intelligence. Wolfgang von Kempelen died in 1804, never revealing the complete secret of his most famous creation. Johann Allgaier, the chess master who defeated Napoleon while hidden in a box, died in obscurity. William Schlumberger died of fever in a foreign land, his contributions to chess history long unrecognized. The Turk itself burned to ashes in Philadelphia. Yet their collective legacy lives on every time we ask Siri a question, every time a chess engine calculates the optimal move, every time we wonder whether artificial intelligence will surpass human intelligence. The robot that fooled Napoleon did not really exist. But in trying to create it, in dreaming it into being, Kempelen and his successors showed us something true about human nature. We are creatures who create, who imagine, who reach beyond ourselves toward possibilities that seem impossible. The Mechanical Turk was a lie that pointed toward truth. It was an 18th century fantasy that helped build our 21st century reality. And perhaps, in the end, that is the greatest trick the Mechanical Turk ever performed. It made us believe in the impossible, and in believing we made the impossible real. If you've enjoyed this journey through chess history, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the board's memory. Every subscription helps us continue exploring the fascinating stories behind the royal game. Thank you for watching, and until next time, may your moves be inspired and your games memorable.